In Chad, opposition leader Suksi Masra has been handed a 20-year prison sentence and filed 1 billion CFA francs after being found guilty of charges including incitement and complicity in murder. Now, he says the case is political and plans to appeal, and with 64 co-defendants given the same term, many see this as a harsh crackdown on dissent. Similarly, in Uganda, Elson Tumwine, a 24-year-old Makerere student, was jailed for 2 months after pleading guilty to offensive communication and computer misuse over a TikTok video that criticized President Yoweri Museveni. Now, Tumwine vanished on 8th June and was later found at a police station in July amid claims that he would be abducted or he had been abducted and mistreated by military agents, allegations that the authorities have not addressed, fueling fresh worries about free speech ahead of next year's elections. Today on The Conversation, I am joined by Mpiriwe Mark. He's a media personality in Kampala, Uganda. We also have Nixon Katembo. He's an analyst, a Great Lake and East Africa in Johannesburg, South Africa. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us at this time.
Thanks for having us.
All right, so let me begin with you, Nixon. Nixon, Suksi Masra has just been handed 20 years in prison and fined the equivalent of about $1.8 million. Meanwhile, prosecutors were actually asking for 25 years and not even the 20-year term. Now, looking at the charges against him, do you think that the sentence is proportionate? And does the fact that the court gave him 20 years suggest independence, or would you say that it's still very much a political message?
It's more than a political message rather than charges or equivalent to the charges that were brought against him. Remember, he is an opposition leader who was called into government after he was in exile in Central African Republic and later went to Chad to assist in forming the government, become a prime minister immediately after Idris Deby Mohammed tried to form a government of transition of national unity leading up to the elections. And of course, 5 months later, he ran against Idris Deby to the presidency, which he lost. And I think this sentence sent rather a political message, as I said earlier, to make sure that the president crushed dissent and the opposition is curtailed in a way that they have sentenced him to such a hefty time in prison.
We're still talking about Chad before we move to Uganda. Let's come back to you, Mpiriwe. As Suksi left the court, he told supporters to stand firm. Now, how much weight do you think a statement like this carries for his movement and for the stability of Chad?
The fact that he was already into creating a government of national unity by bringing him in from exile so that there can be some semblance of calm, so that people can be able to work together in that country. We've seen that in several countries in Africa. Remember, even that forced another form of arrangement with Kenya too earlier on, a few years ago. But even when these messages are passed on, when he says we remain calm and we shall, stay strong and remain calm, the message is still the same, because the legal representation, on the other hand, is saying that they don't believe in the charges that were brought against him, and they still think that he doesn't deserve the 20 years or even the fine and all the accusations that, which include murder among the charges that were levied against him. But when they say remain calm, it still doesn't change much of the messaging earlier on, which is it's more than just getting the sentence. There has to be more of a conversation to bring the country together, because there are people from the other side that he represents that feel like this is not a case that is worth the charge that he was given or even the sentence that he was given. So I don't think that will solve anything for now, but we shall wait and see how that goes.
All right, now while we wait, let's come back to you, Nixon. Now, this particular trial is tied to deadly clashes back in May that left dozens dead. Now, is it possible to really separate a criminal trial like this, from the wider ethnic and security tensions that triggered the violence?
Both goes hand in hand in the sense that when you have injustice perpetrated by the state or by bringing frivolous charges against a political opponent, whom in a democratic dispensation should be allowed to exercise his political and civil right, which then culminated into the kind of skirmishes that you see on the street. And I think that really talks much about what is the nature of politics in Chad in a way that the democratic spaces shrinks. It's not only in Chad, we have seen this in many African states. I think the colleague in Uganda will attest to that and how the National Unity Platform there, which is opposition party led by Robert Chagulanyi, known as Bobby Wine, who also faced similar problems with the government of Uganda, and many other in Kenya as well. We've seen protests elsewhere on the continent. So the question is how the democratic process unfold in a country, and the political leaders also, those in power, are letting these democratic processes to be able to unfold without any political interference. And in the case of Chad, particularly with the sentencing of Mr. I think this is a political overreach, but also the government trying to ensure that the question is set.
All right, now let's, Mr. Mark, looking at the 64 other co-defendants, that were given exactly the same sentence, what do you have to say about that as well? Is that a good evidence of fair process, or do you think that it looks like a blanket crackdown? Because a lot of people and even rights groups have actually said that, it is a crackdown on dissent.
It's surprising that the story about Chad is almost like the same thing that happens everywhere. Even when you look at other countries that have dealt with where an opposition leader has been imprisoned, is always along with other people, and they're almost always given the same charge, and the story always remains the same. But at the end of the day, the courts cannot usually resolve a process that is usually brought about by an issue in the democratic process. It always has to be much more than what is resolved in court. It's rather, most of the times it requires more of a conversation. Just like it's almost like the same arrangement when he was already exiled, and he had to come back from exile, and then they later formed a government of national unity to try and bridge that tension between the two sides. I don't think that this issue of bring the issue to court and then trying to resolve an electoral process by sentencing him, when already in the eyes of the people is already seen as someone who is persecuted, along with the group that is almost given the same exact sentence. I don't think that will resolve the problem, and it opens up a bigger conversation of why do we always have to keep doing the same thing? Because you see this spread across the entire continent, and maybe the conversation we should be having is, after how many times can we keep doing this, that we realize that we will always get back to the same problem. We will never resolve any of the issues that are brought up, and we probably need to resolve democratic issues differently. And I understand that we are growing as a democracy. We are trying some of the things, and this is seen like across the entire continent. We are growing and we are maturing. We are young democracies, and there are things that, because even when we try to make comparisons with other countries, you realize that probably as democracies they have been in through it more years than we have. But when you see even them, they are having challenges, and they have been there quite longer than we have. So maybe the conversation shouldn't be resolved in court, and of course, with people that were murdered and killed, someone has to account for that at the end of the day. But I still feel like no matter which way you look at it, people will always look at it in this way as a political persecution, rather than actually a case brought to court, gone through the due process, and then we go to a conclusion, which is the sentencing.
All right, now still with you, Mr. Mark, let's talk about what happened over in Uganda, where Elson Tumwine, a 24-year-old student, disappeared in June, apparently, and then reappears a month later at a police station. And now he's in jail for like 2 months over a TikTok video against the president. Now, speak to us about it. Tell us what actually happened and what particular questions should we be asking about, what happened, that he went missing in those months as well.
So his case, Edson Tumwine, his case is something that originates from a 2022 amendment of the Computer Misuse Act, and with that, there were stipulations of that amendment, which were as follows: criminalize unauthorized sharing or writing material that demeans others, targeting protected classes like tribes, religion, and gender. So that's how it was brought up when they were making the amendment, though there was a lot of controversy surrounding it, because people tried to brought up issues that it might be targeting people in the political arena. There was another clause that was also brought in, which is prohibit sharing of children information without parental consent, and then ban content that contributes hate speech, false or malicious information, or unsolicited content. Ban individuals convicted under the Act from holding public office for 10 years. So in the case of Edson, he shared a video on TikTok in which he talked about the president of Uganda and the Speaker of Parliament. And there have been, apart from, with his case, there have been instances of even other people who have, I know mostly what gets highlighted is mostly issues that do with the political leaders, but there have been instances where people on social media have talked about other public people who are not even holding office in government and have been brought and charged under the Computer Misuse Act. There have been, and that I think this happened mostly right around the pandemic time. Around that time, most of the cases came up like that, and people ended up in trouble over information shared on social media. Now, when I look at Edison's case, he later on took responsibility for that, and that's why they handed him the 2 months sentence, because he took responsibility of what he did and decided not to waste court's time. But I think the overall conversation should be, I understand social media is something that we use and is a form of communication that we can express. Not making any excuses for what happened to Edson or any other person that is charged under the Computer Misuse Act, but maybe we have to have a conversation.
All right, Mr. Mark and Nixon, if you could just give us a few minutes. We actually have to cross over to the Murtala Mohammed International Airport, where we did say earlier that there was a protest happening, and we still have our correspondent there, Sarah Yeku, who would be giving us more on that. Go ahead, Sarah. All right, away from that, now let's come back to our topic of discussion where we were talking about Chad and Uganda and how there is a crackdown on dissent and two people, each in both countries have actually been sentenced at the moment. Now, we still have Mpiriwiwe Mark from Uganda and also Nixon Katembo from South Africa still to speak with us. Now, Nixon, thank you so much, gentlemen, for staying with us, by the way. Nixon, let's come back to you. Now, moving on to, the student that was sentenced in Uganda, apparently he pleaded guilty and also asked for forgiveness in court. Now, in your own opinion, how do you judge this? How do you judge that it's actually a genuine plea or a result of pressure behind the scenes?
I think one have to look at the manner in which first in the bill that the computer misuse bill was brought into the parliament in Uganda. It came at the height of the previous elections that where I think TikTok and Twitter then X now was being used as well as Facebook to mobilize for a political message against the government of Uganda, but also elsewhere on the continent. So we've seen concerted effort on the continent and in many countries to make sure that there is laws that are brought somehow to curtail what then political leaders found as a way of putting this in question of laws in parliament, to make sure that what could have been seen as a misuse, rather a curtailment of dissent in terms of spread of information in the current technological advancement. That have happened not only in Uganda, but we saw that the same happening in Tunisia with the President Kais Saied changing the law and bringing in a new law that speaks to the very same kind of similar computer misuse law that was passed by the Ugandan parliament, to which this particular student, Tumwina, was imprisoned for. At the same time, so in Tunisia as well, the opposition leader has been jailed for the same reason that Misra in Chad is also being, sentenced for 20 years. And you see, as my interlocutor on the panel said, they are charged alongside many other political activities in the same manner with the same sentences. And I think we find ourselves in a need of technological advancement where it challenged the political status quo, but also the driving of the messages in terms of how political messages communicated, but also how propaganda from the state agencies, but also media that align with governments or align with the political, a particular political narrative are controlled in a way, and therefore these laws are brought in to sort of bring in the name of managing communications in the society and so on. But in the real sense, they have a political message, and we see it in a way that people are being imprisoned for having expressed a particular opinion regarding social issues, and that perhaps are in line with those who are in power or who feel aggrieved by the message that have been said through social media.
All right. Now, Mr. Mark, we know that Suksay did say that, he was going to appeal the ruling. But then what about for the families of, or the family of the student in Uganda? What legal or humanitarian options does he have, or do they have right now?
according at the moment, I don't think he will repeal the sentence because compared to what others have faced, some would say this is a bit more. It is a bit lenient. I know. I'm not supporting. I'm not supporting the sentence and everything that comes along with it. But maybe this, because this is the sixth time someone from TikTok has been apprehended before courts and sentenced, and charges brought against them. Maybe in Edison's case, for example, I think in this case he kind of like locked up himself in getting caught up with the act, because he invoked tribal sentiments and he brought in another country into the conversation in his video that he did on TikTok, and then he kind of like he did everything possible to make sure that he gets caught up in the act, and on appeal, I wonder how. I don't think he will appeal it, because even if he decided to try and appeal that, I wonder how he would be successful with that, because he invoked tribal sentiments, brought in another country into the picture, and at some point he kind of like brought in a whole a whole conversation about a certain group of people targeted to be killed, and that's the kind of trouble he found himself in. So I think maybe moving forward, there should be some responsibility, and this is mostly for the young people, and because the law is already there, it was passed amongst too much contradiction and disagreements about what offensive communication is, because it's a broad term and it can be interpreted however one of the sides decides to interpret it, because it's just blanket, it's offensive communication. But maybe moving forward, we should be responsible, and this is for the young people. I know we are getting into an election year. Like, for example, Uganda is getting into elections in January, but this whole remainder of the next 6 months, it's going to be conversations around politics and how that will be, we can navigate that space for the young people specifically that I'm speaking to. Maybe there should be conversations on maybe we be a bit responsible on how we communicate. And this is not to curtail anyone from having free speech or any of that, but it's more on the side of, for example, this guy was a student at Makerere University. I'm a former student at Makerere University. It's unfortunate to see the predicament he finds himself in, but maybe there should be a bigger conversation on how can we try and not get ourselves into trouble, because we are.
All right.
Yeah, it's so bad.
All right.
You look at the video.
All right. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time. Periwe, Mark, a media personality in Uganda, and also Nixon Katembo, analyst, Great Lakes and East Africa in South Africa. Thank you so much once again. We appreciate you for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you.